So if you want to know yourself, I definitely recommend meditation. And apparently 10 minutes is pretty good, but 20 minutes is a good ideal dose. Some people meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour at night, but really you're just observing your own thoughts. You want to be aware of what's going on inside of you. And so if you want to know yourself, your mind, then I suggest paying attention to the working of your mind. I believe the long tradition of meditation is also a method of deactivating, or at least being highly aware of, the human modules of our brain. Meditation techniques are a systematic path to dispelling our mental illusions. Each meditation practitioner noticed the drives and thoughts of their mind. Through attention and will, we can increase or decrease the activity of brain regions. Think of all the drives and thoughts we have: the desire for water, food, safety, comfort, the constant chatter of our ego-driven mind, caught in the past, fear of the future, always thinking of I. What is left when we silence all of this activity? Put another way, what is always there in your mind when we feel and think anything? We are a swirl of living matter. We came from nothing and will return to nothing. What if we currently are nothing? When we think of ourselves, an organic neural network returns a perception. What happens when we deactivate that neural network and look beyond it? Much like analyzing an artificial neural network one layer at a time, we can mentally peel back the layers of our mind momentarily. At the core of the self, we see nothing. The core is an empty space surrounded by structure. We are a whole. We are defined by what surrounds the whole. Thus far, my deepest insight from meditation is you are space for the world. By observing the world, we create a representation of that object in the timeless, boundless space that we are. And this is coming from one person's particular view on a type of meditation. That this idea that we are timeless and boundless, if you really pay attention to consciousness in the present, that is how it appears. By the constant regulation of our bodily systems, we are simulated in our own minds. We create the ego, the idea of ourselves. We are a living creature who dreams who we are. So another quick aside here about how my views have changed. There are, of course, psychologically a lot of factors that go into our sense of self. And I'll have to say that from studying philosophy and psychology, there's something very odd about personal identity. And when you really get into it, there's so many problems with basically every view of personal identity. And I've come to believe that we've made a mistake a long time ago about how English is used about the self. We tend to think of ourselves as a noun, as an object. But what if our sense of I is not a noun, it's a verb? It's like saying, I am walking. Are you walking all the time? What's the nature of walking? That's a temporary activity that you do. And I think that our sense of self is also a temporary activity that we do, much like walking. So when we say I and all these things related to ourself, it's like that's a verb. We're selfing, we're selfers. So it's just not quite an object, but an activity, a pattern of neural circuitry. I'll also have to say I've watched a lot of Sam Vaknin on YouTube. I've read some of his works, and he has a very interesting and grandiose and appealing way of talking about senses of self and just psychology in general. So I would say that, if we talk about the id, the ego, the superego, many of these concepts have stuck around. But the ego has many functions, but among the top three would be reality testing. So seeing what concepts would be realistic. There's also a stable sense of self-worth, so how we feel. And there's memory and how we view ourselves consistently over time. So these are like the main functions of the ego and our sense of self. And nothing is really terribly bad about it. Again, I do think it's evolutionarily advantageous, but fitness beats truth. It's not about the truth here. If we were to truly see ourselves as we are, which is potentially selfless, it probably wouldn't be as advantageous as if we believe this story that our brain tells itself, that we're consistent through time, that we are like an object, that we are the same person. And there's something I want to get about the brain that I've since learned and I think about a lot more all the time is the primary function of the brain and the ego is to reduce anxiety. That's something to think about. So when you hear a belief system, when you hear someone believing something, maybe it sounds a little odd, you can start to ask yourself, how would this reduce anxiety? And anxiety is a generalized fear, a fear without a direct source. And what does fear do to us? Well, internally, it deregulates us. It's dysregulation. Our body gets out of whack a little bit. But the brain's primary function is to bring us into homeostasis. It's to regulate us. So a lot of our beliefs are not actually, again, about the truth or anything. It's about reducing anxiety. That's the main function of ego.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip, please consider checking out the full video and the series linked in the description.